Shocking return of the OTC. Roman Reigns makes epic comeback on WWE Raw and main event. Roman Reigns just orchestrated the most explosive and strategically brilliant return in WWE history, and what the original Tribal Chief did during Monday Night Raw's main event has completely demolished every existing power structure, shattered multiple championship storylines, and created a situation so volatile that wrestlers are already forming alliances and making desperate moves to protect themselves from what's coming next. This wasn't just a surprise return, this was a declaration of war that's going to reshape WWE for the next decade. But here's what's going to absolutely enrage you and spark the biggest controversy in wrestling. Roman Reigns didn't return to challenge for championships or settle old scores. He returned with a completely rebuilt bloodline that includes shocking new members nobody saw coming, and his first act back was systematically destroying the current main event scene so thoroughly that 3 separate title pictures are now in complete chaos, and WWE management is frantically rewriting months of carefully planned storylines because the OTC just made it clear that nothing matters except what he decides matters. The most disturbing part is how Roman's return exposed just how fragile WWE's main event scene had become without him. Within 15 minutes of his music hitting, the Tribal Chief proved that every storyline, every push, every carefully constructed narrative that WWE had built during his absence was nothing more than filler waiting for the real main event player to return and reclaim what was always his. And the method of his return is what has everyone terrified, because Roman didn't come back alone, he didn't come back humble, and he didn't come back asking for opportunities. He came back with an army, with a master plan that was clearly months in the making, and with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you're so valuable to WWE that you can literally do whatever you want and the company has no choice but to build everything around you. The question that should terrify every WWE superstar is this: if Roman Reigns can return unannounced and single-handedly destroy the entire main event landscape in one night, what's stopping him from deciding your push, your storyline, and your career trajectory are obstacles that need to be eliminated when he's ready to take what he wants. Let me tell you exactly how Roman's epic comeback unfolded, why it was so much more than just a return, and what his presence means for everyone in WWE moving forward. Monday Night Raw's main event was supposed to be a massive triple threat match for the #1 contendership to the World Heavyweight Championship. 3 of WWE's top rising stars were positioned in this match, wrestlers who'd been carefully built up over the past several months to fill the void that Roman's absence had created in the main event picture. This was supposed to be their moment to prove they belonged at the top level. The match itself was fantastic, with all 3 competitors delivering the kind of performance that justifies their pushes and demonstrates why management sees them as the future. The crowd was fully invested, the near falls were getting massive reactions, and it genuinely felt like WWE was successfully transitioning to a new era with fresh faces and exciting matchups. The finish was approaching, with one wrestler setting up for their finisher on another, the third preparing to break it up at the last second. Classic triple threat psychology that the crowd was eating up. The referee was in position. Commentary was building the moment perfectly. Everything was set for a new #1 contender to be crowned and a fresh main event storyline to begin. Then the lights went out. The arena went completely black, and the crowd's reaction was immediate, a mixture of confusion, anticipation, and the kind of electric energy that only comes when people sense something massive is about to happen. The darkness lasted for what felt like forever but was probably only 10 seconds, and in that silence, you could feel the entire building holding its breath. When the lights came back on, Roman Reigns was standing in the center of the ring, and the explosion of sound from the crowd was absolutely deafening. But Roman wasn't alone. Standing with him were members of the Bloodline, but not the same configuration people remembered. There were new faces, shocking additions that immediately made everyone realize this wasn't just Roman returning to reclaim his spot. This was a new regime being announced, with new soldiers, new strategies, and new targets. The 3 wrestlers who'd been competing in the triple threat were now scattered around the ring, completely shocked and unsure how to respond. Roman stood in the center, not even acknowledging them at first, as Paul Heyman stepped forward with a microphone and that distinctive voice that always signals something significant is about to be said. Ladies and gentlemen, after months of watching WWE struggle to fill the void left by the original Tribal Chief's temporary absence, after watching lesser talents try and fail to capture even a fraction of the dominance that defines the head of the table, after enduring storyline after storyline that meant nothing because the only storyline that matters in WWE is the Bloodline storyline, the Tribal Chief has decided it's time to remind everyone of a truth they tried desperately to forget. Paul paused for dramatic effect as the crowd hung on every word. There is no WWE without Roman Reigns. There is no main event without the Tribal Chief's permission. There is no championship that matters more than the acknowledgement of the head of the table. And everything that has happened during his absence? It was all just filler. Placeholder storylines for placeholder wrestlers who were keeping the throne warm until the real king decided to return. The 3 wrestlers in the ring looked furious at the disrespect, but before any of them could respond, Roman took the microphone from Paul and delivered what's already being called one of the most devastating promos of his career. I've been gone for months, handling my business, taking care of my family, doing what needed to be done outside this ring. And while I was gone, I watched. I watched WWE try to pretend like my absence created opportunities for new stars. I watched them push people who aren't ready, tell stories that don't matter, and convince themselves that maybe, just maybe, WWE could survive without Roman Reigns. Roman's voice grew colder and more intense, but you know what I realized while I was watching? Nothing changed. Yeah, there were different faces in the main events, different names on the marquee, but none of it mattered. Because every single person who tried to fill my spot was just pretending, playing dress up, acting like they belonged in a position they could never truly earn. Roman's gaze swept across the three wrestlers still standing in the ring with him. You three are perfect examples. You're talented. You can work. You get decent reactions. But you're not me. You're not on my level. You're not capable of carrying WWE the way I've carried it for years. And the fact that you were main eventing Monday Night Raw while I was gone doesn't mean you earned anything. It means WWE was desperate and had no choice but to use whoever was available. One of the wrestlers, showing either incredible courage or terrible judgment, stepped forward and grabbed a microphone to respond. We've been here every week busting our asses while you were gone doing whatever. We've earned our spot in this main event, and you don't get to just come back and act like the wrestler didn't finish that sentence because Roman's Bloodline members immediately attacked all three competitors with vicious, coordinated precision. This wasn't a chaotic brawl, it was an organized assault with each Bloodline member having specific targets and executing a clear strategy. What followed was one of the most brutal and systematic destructions in Raw history. The three wrestlers who'd been competing for the #1 contendership were completely overwhelmed by the numbers and the intensity of the Bloodline's attack. Every time one of them tried to mount a comeback, they were immediately cut off and punished even more severely. Roman Reigns directed the attack like a conductor leading an orchestra, pointing to specific targets and calling for specific moves. He didn't participate in the beating himself, he stood back and watched with satisfaction as his family dismantled three rising stars whose only crime was being in the main event when the tribal chief decided to return. The most disturbing aspect was how the attack targeted not just the wrestlers' bodies but their credibility and momentum. Every signature move they tried to execute was countered and made to look ineffective. Every fighting spirit comeback was squashed immediately. The message being sent was clear: these wrestlers don't belong in the main event, and their pushes over the past few months were illusions that Roman was now shattering. Security and referees rushed to stop the attack, but the Bloodline easily fought them off. It took what seemed like half the roster flooding the ring to finally separate the Bloodline from their victims, and by that time the damage was catastrophic. All three wrestlers were laying motionless in the ring, their big moment completely destroyed, their momentum potentially killed forever, their credibility as main event players called into serious question. But Roman still wasn't finished making his statement. Once the ring was cleared except for the Bloodline, Roman took the microphone again and delivered a message that has every WWE superstar terrified about what comes next. Let me make something very clear to everyone in the back and everyone watching around the world. I didn't come back to work my way up the card. I didn't come back to earn opportunities or prove I deserve to be here. I came back to take what's mine, eliminate anyone who thinks they can stand in my way, and remind WWE that there's the Bloodline era, and then there's everything else that doesn't matter. Roman's voice grew more threatening. Every champion on this roster? You're holding my property. Every #1 contender? You're waiting in line for something you'll never receive because I'm cutting to the front. Every rising star who thinks this is their time? Your time is over before it even began, because the OTC is back, and I'm going to systematically dismantle anyone who forgot their place while I was gone. Then Roman dropped the bombshell that sent shockwaves through WWE and social media. Starting right now, I'm declaring myself the #1 contender to every championship that matters. World Heavyweight Championship, Undisputed Championship, doesn't matter which brand, doesn't matter who's holding it. If it's gold and it's important, I'm coming for it. And anyone who has a problem with that? Roman gestured to the three destroyed wrestlers being helped out of the ring. That's your future if you speak up. The show went off the air with the Bloodline standing tall, Roman's music playing, and the announce team struggling to process the implications of what they just witnessed. The immediate aftermath of Roman's return has created absolute pandemonium throughout WWE that's still unfolding days later. First, there's the three wrestlers who were destroyed during the main event. All three suffered legitimate injuries from the brutal attack, nothing career-ending, but enough to sideline them for weeks and completely derail their carefully planned pushes. Their #1 contendership triple threat match never got a proper finish, and now WWE has to figure out what to do with three rising stars whose momentum was killed in the most public way possible. Some backstage sources suggest these wrestlers are furious about having their moment hijacked and are considering approaching management about compensation or guaranteed future opportunities. Others report they understand this is wrestling and being part of such a historic segment could ultimately benefit their careers despite the short-term setback. Second, there's the championship picture chaos. Roman's declaration that he's the #1 contender to every major championship has created impossible booking situations. Multiple wrestlers had already earned title shots through tournaments, wins, and storyline progression, but now WWE has to figure out how to balance those existing obligations with accommodating their biggest stars' demands. Current champions are reportedly nervous because having Roman target you is both an opportunity and a curse. Yes, working with Roman guarantees main event positioning and major attention, but it also means potentially losing your championship and being positioned beneath the tribal chief in WWE's hierarchy. Third, there's the new Bloodline configuration and what it means for existing factions. Roman returned with members that include some shocking additions. Wrestlers who'd previously been positioned elsewhere are now aligned with the tribal chief, creating a stable that's more dangerous and more versatile than the original Bloodline ever was. This new formation has other factions scrambling to figure out their response. Do they try to form counter-alliances? Do they avoid confrontation and hope Roman targets someone else? Do they acknowledge the tribal chief and hope for mercy? Every faction in WWE is now making strategic decisions based on how to survive in a landscape where Roman Reigns has returned stronger than ever. Fourth, there's the brand warfare implications. Roman's declaration that he doesn't care which brand a championship is on completely disrupts WWE's careful brand separation. If Roman can challenge for titles on Raw or SmackDown whenever he wants, what does that mean for brand-exclusive storylines and roster splits? Now here's the question that's going to determine whose side you're on. Was Roman Reigns justified in destroying the main event and declaring himself the #1 contender to every championship, or did he show unacceptable disrespect to the wrestlers who kept WWE running during his absence? Your answer reveals whether you prioritize star power and drawing ability over fairness and meritocracy, and whether you think someone of Roman's stature has earned the right to operate by completely different rules than everyone else. Here's the even more controversial question: should the three wrestlers who got destroyed be grateful for being part of such a historic segment, or should they be angry that their big moment was hijacked to serve Roman's return? Because there's a real argument that being destroyed by Roman Reigns and the Bloodline on his return episode is actually a form of elevation. It positions you as important enough to be targeted. But there's also a legitimate case that having your momentum killed so completely in your biggest moment to date is impossible to recover from. Tell me in the comments, what was your genuine reaction when Roman's music hit during the main event? Were you excited to see the OTC return, or were you frustrated that he hijacked someone else's moment? And here's what I really want to know: which current WWE champion do you think Roman should target first? Who has the credibility and the story to actually stand up to the tribal chief after such a dominant return? Roman Reigns' shocking return on Monday Night Raw wasn't just an epic comeback, it was a hostile takeover that reminded everyone why he's called the original tribal chief and why his presence fundamentally changes everything about WWE's landscape. The systematic destruction of the main event sent a message that nobody can ignore. Roman doesn't ask for opportunities, he takes them, and anyone who questions his right to do so becomes another example of what happens when you forget your place. The rebuilt Bloodline is more dangerous than ever, unified behind Roman's leadership and clearly ready to dominate both brands rather than just one. The free agent mentality Roman has adopted gives him unprecedented flexibility to target anyone, anywhere, anytime, without being constrained by traditional boundaries. And every wrestler in WWE, from champions to challengers to rising stars, now has to recalibrate their entire career strategy based on one simple reality: Roman Reigns is back, he's claiming everything is his by right, and the only question is whether you acknowledge him peacefully or get destroyed resisting the inevitable. The original tribal chief has returned, and WWE will never be the same.